All right, this is show number 134 on, what is today, January 27, 2015. And tonight we have a guest coming back to us on what has been one of our most popular subjects that we've ever done. And that is Don Com. I'm just going to go with Don Com.
That works for me.
I knew you were going to go there.
You knew I was going to go there. So before we get started, I do have a public service announcement to make that a former guest on the show has asked me to announce tonight. And that has to do, let me get my notes here so I can say this right. That has to do with the disturbing new trend of workshops involving grandmothers knitting mittens. And sometimes it's done by their grandsons making them do this.
Really?
So if you are aware of any grandmothers who are having to knit a lot of mittens, you should report that to your nearest photographer.
Oh boy. Okay. I think they're on to me here.
Any idea, Don, who put us up to that?
You know what? I don't have any concrete ideas, so I'm hesitant to say a name, but a few names come to mind.
So his first two initials are A and D.
Okay. Yep. I think I know who this is.
A.D. Wheeler, who was on the show, the best of 2014. He said to ask you how your grandmother's doing, that he's very concerned about her.
She's doing well. She made me, well, let's step back a little bit here to understand what the heck this inside joke is about. So I have with me here a homemade black mitt. Now, this was made by my grandmother. And she had given me a bunch of, a pair of mittens, 2009, I think. And, just something, at Thanksgiving. Here you go, sweetheart, keep these in your car. Just make sure that, if your car breaks down, you stay warm. You know how grandmothers worry. And when I started getting into macro photography, I found that exact mitten was the perfect backdrop to photograph snowflakes against. And since then, all of my snowflakes have been photographed against that black mitten. And it's somewhat infamous now at this point. So it's just one of those silly things where, and yes, I afterwards, when I was doing a crowdfunding campaign for a book on the topic of snowflakes, I asked my grandmother if she could knit me a couple of extra pairs and I could give some away as promos on certain, certain perk levels for that. And some people got them and I still had a few others. And so I still have a handful of spare mittens just in case I might lose one. But every single one of my snowflake photographs is shot on that black mitten. So it's kind of a fun thing. And people ask me, well, why? I understand just an experimentation to create that kind of an effect. But, it turns out that the black contrast is what gives me a nice glowing crystal if I get the right flash angle. But the snowflakes will get caught in various fibers within the mitten. Now, I'll show you some examples of exactly how this works and how I edit through that process. But it's actually easier to edit out those fibers than it would be a solid continuous background in behind. And so it ended up, I tried a few different things, different types of felts and papers and even glass, but I just found that black mitten. That was the ticket. And it has been something of a tradition now. I'm not going to change it.
Yeah. Well, AD said that you guys were on a show where you were doing some kind of like a photo challenge type thing where you were both, everybody was critiquing each other's photos or something like that. I can't remember what he called it.
Yeah, for the Arcanum, it was Creation Wars.
Yes, that's what it does. And I guess during that talk that goes on for quite a while, he sounded like he said it went on for hours, that the fact that your grandmother is knitting these came up, and he asked me to just ask you how she was doing. And of course I had to say, wait. Before I ask this question, I got to know, is she healthy? I don't want to be stepping
She's happy and healthy, and she's very proud. She hasn't knit me mittens in a while. She's kind of retired from that duty, but I still have a few extras, and so I had extras. And so on that podcast, I said, well, if anybody during the live recording orders a copy of the book, I'll give them a mitten. And so Mike, I know that is this going out live right now?
It is, yes.
If anybody goes to skycrystals.ca between now and the time we finish recording, then I will send them a mitten as well. I still have enough to make that offer. So,
and that is skycrystals.com or skycrystals?
Skycrystals.ca.
So if I go to your website.
And that'll, it's just kind of a fun thing to say. And hopefully, if people want one, then they'll actually use it and take some good, fun images. It'll make my grandmother even all that more proud of the knitting that she's done.
Well, she's done a great job. And,
Yeah.
and if you go to Donkom, DONKOM.ca, there's a link there to Sky Crystals, or you can just type in skycrystals.ca, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So that'll be kind of fun to see if anybody's listening. And you know, it's funny because that book, as you saw from our previous recording of this, I share all my secrets. I hold nothing back, right? And I enjoy that. It's kind of half the fun. And so I like to go in and figure out exactly, what the challenges people are having, and then showing them solutions to that kind of a challenge. And I do that in the book. So the book has it's 300 pages, and 100 of those pages is dedicated to just the photographic techniques and the editing workflow, which we're going to get into in a little bit here. But I kind of wanted to save snowflakes for a little bit later in the show. I have something else kind of queued up right now.
Do you mean this book right here?
Where? Oh yeah! Hey, look at that! It's strategically pointed in behind you on your bookshelf.
I should flip over to me so people can see that book right there. Sky Crystals.
Well, yes, exactly. And so I have a number of copies here. Happy to sign them and get them sent out to anybody who's interested in photographing snowflakes. And the fun thing is, those techniques are translated directly into most areas of extreme macro photography. So if you're doing water droplet refractions, or if you're doing heck, I've even photographed grains of salt with exactly the same technique as I do with snowflakes. And it's fun to see those skills translate. And just recently, I had some fun experimenting with frozen soap bubbles, which I'll encourage everybody to experiment with if the temperature drops cold enough for them.
Is one of them in the group that you sent me? Because I think I know which one it is.
Yeah.
If that's what I think it is. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a frozen soap bubble. And so some of those kinds of concepts to play around with and execute are it's just a soap bubble that has a bit of I think the recipe for that is 6 parts water to 2 parts dish detergent and 1 part white corn syrup, and that'll give it a bit more resilience when it's kind of going and hitting into the snow, just to make it last a bit longer. It's kind of funny when here I'll share some macro stuff, and I want to kind of get through my workflow, sort of how I go through a shooting process. I can see there's some water droplet refraction images kind of up on the screen there, so I want to here, let me just do a screen share.
You want to take over? Okay. Let me get this focused on you.
Yeah, let me go and share a window. Let's share the wonderful Lightroom here that I have set up. And so this image that I'm currently showing, can you see this orangish kind of image here?
I can, yes.
This was one fun concept of water droplet refraction experimentation. And so when I'm playing around with this kind of stuff, I usually have different flowers, different types of seeds and grasses and all sorts of stuff where water droplets will bead up very, very nicely within that mix. And so the more spherical a droplet, the more it will act like a lens. And in this case, I'm using some seeds that are, I think they're from a wildflower called prairie smoke, or some close relative to that. Now, the problem with these is most of them, this looks like a relatively static image, but when you get these things wet, they start curling and twisting around each other, which makes it really hard to do focus stacking and to combine multiple images together to get more depth of field. Because as you can see, the depth of field is so shallow. These the droplets on the tip here might be sharp and in focus, but as soon as I deviate from that and I start going down the branch towards sort of the base of it, everything gets soft and out of focus. And it's very difficult to have everything that you want in one of these images in focus at the same time. So let's go on to another fun experiment. I started with this flower and this concept. I liked it, but I wanted something lighter. I wanted a different mood, and I liked playing around with the surface of water here. So this is sort of a series of shots that illustrate the experimental process that I might go through in sort of one of these experiments. So here we have a flower that is half submerged underwater in the background that's out of focus, and we have a 2 little clamps that are in the foreground here, and they're holding that seed, and it's kind of making a little loop, and those clamps, for anybody that's really curious, they would be one of these little tools right here. This is called a third hand tool. And they cost under $10 from Amazon. You can find them cheaper even here locally. There's a store called Princess Auto that has these for like $5, and they break easy, but Well, it's because this one spent a lot of time underwater and it's all rusted out. But these just have little alligator clips on either side. They're completely posable and positionable, and so those are what I use to hold and sort of manipulate some of these finer points. The flower in the background is being held by a different one as well, and so. If I'm taking that and playing around with just a bowl of water and this kind of seed setup, then I start to experiment with flash and angles. My goal here was to get a reflection on the surface of the water, and you can clearly see in this initial failed attempt that I wasn't getting that. You know, I've got the light hitting far more into the background. It's hitting the foreground a little bit, but there's absolutely no reflection on the surface. So a few more experiments and maybe a few more, and this kind of got me the feeling that I was after. I was starting to get an idea for that reflection. As you can see down here on the bottom, I've got that kind of nice little bit of a reflection. Yeah. That's showing up kind of nicely there. So then I would continue to experiment, and I would twist it around in different ways, and I would play around with different lighting angles and try to create something that I would, consider unique and different. And all of these go through. This is just a creative process. Oftentimes, I don't even have my camera in my hand when I'm twisting and contorting this stuff and figuring out, from one iteration to another. Here's another one that I quite liked that, I was able to get a nice bright color, not with a reflective surface on the water, but I was able to get enough in focus in one frame. And when I see images like this come out of my camera, I get pretty jazzed about it. I get excited.
That is very cool.
It's some of the magic of photography right here, to see all of these little droplets like little crystal balls. And creating that. So there was lots of fun and experimentation, and again, all sorts of different angles, trying to get very, very low to the water here. And this is where I encountered a problem with this setup, where you can see the reflection underneath, a little bit faint, but it's there. When I tried to get this particular type of seed close enough to the surface of the water, the surface tension of the water would adhere itself to the seed. And so it kind of mucked up all the reflections that I was trying to get, and I couldn't get it close enough down to the surface to get the effect that I was after, no matter how I played with things. So at that point, I made the decision that I was going to put the flower seed, or this is a slightly different seed. After they get soaked for a while, they start to lose their dropletiness. Technical term there. And so I put it underwater, and I started doing some experimentation and playing around with that, trying to find the right angle and the right setup. And you can see I've got a nice reflection under here, but I'm also seeing that metal clip. Yeah. So I had to be very, very precise with my flash angle and to get the subject, mostly the flower lit, and enough of the seed lit, but not anything directly below the seed, which would be the clip, because I didn't want that to be illuminated. I want the reflection to be the dominant part in that part of the frame. And so playing around, with a bunch of different lighting options and going through, I'm going to just sort of move around to a bunch of them. I do this all sort of freehand. The camera and the flash are both handheld, and I'm just trying to find the best combination of different ingredients until I find it, somewhere right about here.
And I can ask you a couple of questions.
Of course, Mike.
A lot of these I'm noticing look like they're black and white or something. Is that just something in Lightroom that we're seeing it that way, or maybe Skype's doing it to us?
Well, it is a relatively low color kind of image, okay. At least right now. Like if I zoom in here closely, you'll see some slight blue tones coming in to the image. But by the very nature of it, there wasn't a whole lot of color to begin with. Right near the top, you can see some purples and some yellows that are kind of coming into the flower in the background. But overall, it is relatively flat in this original out of the camera kind of setup. And that's where the post-processing workflow is going to come in.
And then second, your flash. Are you using like a normal hot shoe flash, or are you using the one that goes on the lens?
Yeah, so for this particular case, when I've got my camera behind me, it's got a ring flash on it. I do not use a ring flash for this kind of setup. I use an external flash with a shoe cord. Okay. So that's going to allow me to hold, this will be mounted to the top of the camera, and then the flash itself, I can reach around with my hand. Well, it's actually with this hand, and I'm often twisting and contorting myself all the way around to try and find the right angle for the flash. But if I've got that perfect angle, then I'll just hold it there while I then move the camera forward and backward ever so slightly as I pass through the focal range that I need, firing off continuous bursts the entire time. Now, the reason why I don't use a ring flash for these kind of images is because it will create a ring flash reflection in the droplet itself, and that is problematic at best, because in some cases you can edit it out, but it's more trouble than it would ever otherwise be worth.
Right. Right.
So
And you're talking about multiple droplets.
Yeah, and so it's not just one droplet. If one droplet you might be able to handle, but 500, that's a different story. And so in this case, I'm going to have, say, this image right here. You can see that I've got a fair amount in focus. I've got some interesting, fun details. There's some magic to be held there. But I don't have enough. I want more. And if I go to another frame in this sequence, you'll see that the droplets in this image are slightly different.
I'm actually not getting the screen right now. You getting it?
Oh, you're not?
Maybe if you can unshare and then reshare.
I will unshare then. Stop screen sharing. And then share screens, a window, and Lightroom, and start. And it looks somewhat broken again.
And this happens sometimes in Skype.
Okay, well, let me try something here for a second here, Mike. I'm going to stop that screen, and I'm just going to do a full screen instead of sharing the program, and see if that makes a difference. If not, we'll muddle along through.
We can come back to it.
We can come back to it. I think you have the final result of an image on your end.
Is it an arc?
It's an arc, yeah, and it's got kind of a blue background there as well. And so,
and you know what? Right before you went back to yourself, I saw your screen.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, you know what? Let's try and do that once more, and maybe it'll just catch up. And
while we're waiting on that, is the one I have up? You can see it behind me. Is that the right one?
Nope. It would be it would be a more vertical shot.
All right, let me see if I can find it. I think I know what it is. This one?
Nope. Although I think that might be the same flower in the background.
That's
actually
very vertical.
That is a very vertical one. It has kind of a nice little curve to it coming out of the surface of the water. I don't know if you can see my screen share at all yet again, Mike, but I sent you tons of those beautiful water droplet pictures, and they're all done with the same technique. Yeah, there it is.
There we go.
So that'll be the finished piece for this. And so you can see that I've done some adjustments for the color and the brightness, but moreover, I've increased the depth of field to have the entire thing in focus. And it probably took around 40 frames or so at different focus points, and somewhat of an arduous task to combine them together in Photoshop. And I have to go through that process with most of my extreme macro work, just by the nature of the physics involved. You can't get the entire thing in focus even if you wanted to. Diffraction will limit your results. And so, what was that?
If we could just for a second, let's talk a little bit about your gear, the lens that you're using, and maybe you said you had to use 40 images to focus stack this. What kind of f-stop were you?
So in that case, I would be probably shooting now. This gets a bit tricky because there's a difference between the f-stop that you dial in on your camera and the effective f-stop that your camera is going to be actually using. So as you increase your magnification factor, you also increase your effective aperture. So I'm using the Canon MPE 65mm lens. And that lens will get me 5 times closer on its extreme than the average macro lens will. So a regular dedicated macro lens will get you 1:1 life size. This particular lens will start at 1:1 life size and push me all the way to 5:1. And with extension tubes, I can get that to 6:1. And with some other little bits and pieces, I can get that all the way up to 12:1 magnification. Now, you push against the limits of physics at that point, and the closer you get to your subject, the shallower your depth of field is going to be. Now, for each magnification factor that you have, add 1 stop to the aperture that you've dialed into the top of your camera. So if I'm shooting at 1:1 life size and f5.6, which I was for this image, it would translate to about f8. Now I could probably get away with a little bit less, or a smaller aperture. But if I'm doing that, then the background's going to come more into focus, and I'm not going to be able to maintain the soft effect of the background while through the focus stacking techniques get the foreground nice and sharp. So it's always a bit of a trade-off. But for example, if I have that lens at 12:1 magnification and I'm shooting at f2.8, my effective aperture, if I add 12 stops to that, is 180.
So everything in focus.
Well, no, that's the problem, is that when you get that close, you've got a razor thin depth of field. At f180, at that magnification, you've got a fraction of a millimeter of focus. There's no way to enhance it any farther except from taking multiple photographs. But the problem becomes diffraction. The smaller your aperture, past a certain point, in most cameras it might be around f22 or f32, past that point, light that's supposed to hit 1 pixel will bend as it passes through the aperture. Light is a wave, and if you could imagine, a straight wave passing through an opening, like I'm talking about water, it'll be a curved wave on the other side. And light kind of functions in a very similar way. And so if you have a very, very small opening that light has to pass through, on the other side, it kind of gets a little scattered into a ring pattern. It's called an airy disk. And this means that light that's supposed to hit 1 pixel will actually be hitting neighboring pixels around it in addition to the one that it should be hitting. And that effectively blurs your photograph. And so there's no way around that. That's physics. You're pushing not against the limits of camera technology, but the limits of light itself. And so in a lot of my work, I will actually see this airy disk pattern when I'm doing the most extreme of my macro images. And that's a challenge to work with. But this particular photograph was taken at around 1:1 life size. So this is something approachable for everybody. This is something that everybody can just experiment with. And I don't know if you can see my screen yet, Mike, but I've got the making of photograph, put up on a screen share right now.
You might have to stop it and start again. But while we're waiting on that, if I can ask a couple more questions.
Absolutely.
Some of the things you talked about there is a little bit contrary to what we as photographers normally think about. Normally we think that, all right, if I'm at f2.8, my aperture is going to do a couple of things. One is going to affect my depth of field, and it's going to affect my amount of light that's coming into the lens. So if I'm at f2.8, for a lot of lenses, that's wide open, and I'm letting in as much light as I can possibly get in. But I'm also having a very shallow depth of field. There we go. I can see you now.
Sure.
So don't touch anything.
I won't touch anything.
But what you're saying, because of the 12:1 factor that's happening there, I'm really at f whatever you said, 168 or something like that.
180, yeah.
180. What that makes me think of normally is that I'm going to have a really, really big depth of field and a really, really tiny aperture where hardly any light's coming through. But physically, you're at f2.8 on the lens, aren't you?
I'm at f2.8 on my lens. And so, when I bought that lens and I was playing around with that exact same principle in mind, I was thinking to myself, well, I want to have a greater depth of field. And so I was shooting at f16 and 5:1 magnification. Now, there's actually a chart in the manual for that lens that gives me some conversion factors that says that at f16 and 5:1 magnification, my effective aperture is f96. And it took me a while to realize that it was physics working against me here, because I was getting blurry results. They would look fine in my viewfinder, but then when I looked at the image was softer than the viewfinder. And this is because whenever you're taking a picture, the aperture blades are all the way wide open, right? So it's at f2.8. But then when you take the picture, the aperture blades will spring into place at whatever setting they are, take the picture, and then spring back open. And in that case, when it was closing down, it made the image pass beyond that threshold of diffraction limiting. There are 3 things that affect depth of field in photography. Well, 3 main things. I'm sure there are others. Aperture is the one that everybody thinks of, and we're very familiar with aperture. The smaller you make the aperture, the greater your depth of field will become. Focal length is another one. The longer your focal length, the shallower your depth of field will become as well. And I think that might have to do more with field of view than it does with focal length, because I know that at f2.8 on my fisheye lens, I've got everything in focus, or almost everything. And I can do night landscape stuff at f2.8 and have everything that I need sharp. But the other thing, besides those 2, focal length, aperture, is distance from your subject. So even at the exact same focal length and at the exact same aperture, if you get closer to your subject, the depth of field will be shallower. And as you get closer and closer and closer into this extreme macro world, there's no overcoming that. That is the dominant factor at play, is just the distance from your subject. You cannot hope to have everything in focus. By making your aperture even smaller, you'll probably pass through the point of diffraction, and your most in-focus areas will become soft, and you might have a bit more detail in the previously out-of-focus areas, but it's not a happy trade-off.
And for anybody who hasn't done this, maybe is this similar to when you look through a magnifying, not a magnifying glass, but what is it? Not a telescope, a microscope. You look through a microscope, and you're looking at tiny little whatever you're looking at, and because the more you magnify it, the smaller section you're seeing, and the smaller part of it is in focus. Basically, I guess it's the same principle that's happened there.
It's the same principle. And so at those extreme magnifications, if you've ever used a microscope, you know that you can adjust the microscope slide by a very, very small degree, a millimeter or less, and you will be able to pass entirely through the focal point. And then you have to be very, very delicate with those adjustments to find your focus. And I'm doing the same thing here, but I'm doing it freehand with a camera. And so it's a challenge.
And I love this setup shot because the thing I love about your macro, there's lots of things I love about them, but one of the things I love about it is you enter this whole new world. It's this world that when you look at this shot, you look at the setup shot you have here, it's plain Jane, nothing special about this.
It's my kitchen table.
Yeah.
It's using, again, those third-hand tools. One is submerged under this bowl that I got from a second-hand shop. And the other one behind that has more of a tweezer appendage is holding the flour in place. And, working together just to get all those different ingredients. All of the work here was done before I picked up the camera. I knew I had to put the right ingredients in the right place and in the right order, and there was a lot of trial and error, hours worth of it. But none of that involved the camera until it came time to photograph sort of my creation. This is something of an artistry before photography, and then the photography kind of become the way to express it. Especially because even as cool as this is, anybody looking at it is just going to go, huh, okay, move along. But knowing how that works, and you can kind of see, and this is sort of from a naked eye perspective, you can kind of see the tiny little, circles inside these droplets. You can see this with your own eye if you get close enough to it, and your eyesight is good enough. You can observe this, although it's nowhere near as fantastical as the images that are created from the effect.
Yeah, and I will flip back just for a second if you guys forgot what we're talking about. It's that setup that you just saw is going to end up producing this image, which is just incredible.
It's a fun transition. It's a lot about understanding light. It's about understanding composition. It's about creating an image rather than simply taking an image. And macro photography, I find, is very strong within that context, where you have to think abstractly. You're often constructing something yourself, whether it's some sort of doodad to do what you want. Because I've got all sorts of random household stuff that I cannibalize for use in macro setups like this. You can even see there's an overturned coffee cup off on the side that is being used as a prop for this this tweezer handle. I have random piles of household stuff in strategic locations that are useful for creating some of these setups.
Why don't you use a mount for your camera, though? Because if you got to get such micro adjustments going in and out, wouldn't it make sense to have something to help you? Or, I know I couldn't get a steady shot off. You're talking where I would think you have to be very steady. Or I guess maybe what is your shutter speed that you don't have to worry about it?
Yeah, okay, so one thing is shutter speed and the light source itself. So if I'm using, in that case, again, I'm using the off-camera flash.
Right.
And this is the dominant, if not the only light source that is being applied to the image. So if that is the case, then I'm shooting at my fastest flash sync speed, which I think on my camera is 1/250th of a second. And if in that exposure, it's important to know that is not my exposure length. That, in relative terms, I suppose it is, but the duration of the flash becomes the overall length of the exposure. If you can make an analogy of making like a 10-minute exposure in a dark room and then you pop a flash off right in the middle, well, right. Technically, yes, it's a 10-minute exposure, but the actual duration of the light source is the only real length of that exposure.
Correct.
And so in a camera, the way it works is that the reason why you have a flash sync speed is because for the flash to fire, the entire sensor has to be completely clean and clear of any shutter mechanism. And so in most cameras, well, I mean, there's different ways to do it, but you'll have two shutter mechanisms, a first curtain and a second curtain. So what would happen is that the sensor is completely obstructed. And then what happens is you will have one curtain that will rise and completely clear the sensor, and then you'll have another one that will go up and cover it. And so you have to have the flash fire in that instant where the sensor is completely clear. And that instant will be much, much shorter than 1/250th of a second. It might be 1/20,000th of a second. It all depends on how much flash power is needed. It might be even shorter than that, depending on the kind of flash. And so if that's the case, it doesn't matter how shaky I am. My exposure duration is so short that my real challenge is just getting things in focus. Motion blur be damned. It doesn't matter in that kind of a case, as long as there's no ambient light coming in and mucking up the works.
And
that was a great explanation there of the shutter sync speed for flash. I mean, I knew it, but I don't think I've ever heard it that way, and that really explained it a way that I think just about anybody could understand, or at least anybody who understands anything about photography.
Yeah, no, that was good. So do you also hold it, handheld it, rather than putting it on a tripod or some kind of mount?
Yeah, so I mean, my camera's on a tripod behind me right now, sort of for show. I use tripods a lot for all of my landscape work, for tons of my waterfalls, natural outdoor stuff, and for almost all of my video work. If I'm doing infrared on an unmodified camera, absolutely, the tripod is a necessary piece of the equation. But when I'm dealing with my snowflake work, I cannot use a tripod, just by the nature of how fast I have to get into position around the subject and how flexible I need to be. I developed skills after spending hundreds, if not thousands of hours photographing snowflakes to do all of this stuff handheld. And so because I've got the skill to do it handheld, I embrace that when I'm doing this kind of work. And if you want to use a tripod, you'll probably have great success with it. Just keep in mind, don't spend too much time setting it up, because those water droplets are very small and they're evaporating as you work. And so if you wait 10 minutes because you're setting up the camera once you've got the shot set, your droplets are going to be smaller than they were when you started. And they might not be as beautiful at that point. So speed is still a concern, although it's much less so with water droplets than it would be with the snowflake work.
And I would think also, since you're taking, you talked about that one image having 40 images that you stack together, and that's actually pretty light for you. You do a lot stacking that involves a lot more than that sometimes.
Yeah, as many as 70, I think. 70 is my record.
Okay. But you might be taking several hundred images of a snowflake that then you stack and some together, right?
Well, and so that's the thing, is when I'm doing this process handheld, if I was on a focusing rail and I had some very precise increments and I could tell exactly, where the camera is progressing from one shot to the next, and I can do it in a linear fashion, that's great. I know I've gotten everything that I need. When I'm doing it handheld, I'm kind of passing through the focus forward and back ever so slight. Keep in mind, the depth of field I need to cover is maybe a couple of millimeters, sometimes less than that. And so because I'm doing this somewhat organically, doing it handheld, I don't have a good understanding of if I've gotten all the pieces or not. Like, I'm not 100% sure. I know that I might have the majority, but if I'm missing one slice, one sliver of focus going through that, the shot can be ruined for that. So my safety net is to drastically overshoot. Mm-hmm. And in that case, I will shoot, from that particular image. If I were to go back and sort of scan through the photographs that I had taken of it, and just let me see from the time where I got my angle to be, relatively precise, from the point where I thought that it was going to be, the right angle, and then I started shooting. I'm scanning through lots and lots of images, about here, 178 images I had taken of that particular image, and I'd used around 40 of them. So again, I'm taking far more than I'll actually need, but oftentimes, there's that one that I'm missing, and I end up hunting all the way through to almost the very end of the sequence before I find that final missing piece to the puzzle.
Wow. Yeah. So, and that, that's a way to overcome it, is to overshoot like that. And it's probably quicker than setting up a rig and getting all that minute, adjustments you have going on.
Well, for a shot like the one that we were just talking about with the water droplets, you can spend the time to do that. I'm not going to discourage that whatsoever. And in fact, you can do some, you could probably be a little bit more precise and often more creative with your light source too. But when I'm doing more dynamic subjects, throw that out the window because you need to work as fast as possible. In the case of snowflakes, if 20 minutes go by, the snowflake might be half as big because it's sublimated. It's evaporated back into thin air. Or it might have melted or blown away, or changed its angle slightly, and then your entire setup needs to be readjusted, and then of course that's another section of wasted time. But for me, it's almost more fun to do it handheld. I know fun has to come into part of this equation
Absolutely.
at some point because we have to enjoy what we do. And if I'm sitting there tinkering with knobs and dials to just get a camera set up, that's not the fun part of it. That's sort of the boring, the setup. That's the tedium. And as much of the tedium as I can avoid, the better, because I know I'm going to face that tedium in post processing. There's no avoiding it there. So if I can avoid it in shooting, that's fine.
So and now that you mention that, just as a general set, when a macro shot like the one we saw a second ago, or one of your snowflakes, how much time are you spending on the shoot of that one image?
Well, I would say probably 1 to 2 minutes of actually shooting from the first image to the last image.
Okay.
And I'd say that's pretty well average. And even over that time period, a snowflake is going to melt. It's going to sublimate, and it's going to change its shape. And I'm actually just going to bring up a snowflake that I was working on earlier today here, and I'll show you kind of that process of going through the motions of creating a final piece. Are you ready for that, Mike?
Yep.
All right. So let me just do a screen share. Let me know when you can see it. This should be Lightroom again.
I was hoping it would have learned from it. There we go.
There we go. Okay. So in this case, this snowflake was photographed at 6:1 magnification. And it's still relatively small in the frame. If you could imagine, this thing measures from top to bottom of the frame at 6:1 on a full frame camera. That is the physical measurements of that is about 6 millimeters. And so you can see that this one is probably maybe 1.5, maybe slightly bigger as far as the millimeters it is in diameter. And if I zoom in on that, there's a lot of fun details that are sort of brought up, even on such a tiny scale. Even the tiniest little details in the color in the center of the snowflake are absolutely minuscule, but they're worth photographing. Now, at this point, I probably could have put my extra adapter on the camera, which would have gotten me 12:1. But then the advantage is minimal because, again, I'm dealing with the softening from diffraction and all sorts of creative sharpening techniques are needed. That adapter, by the way, is the Canon Life-Size Converter EF, which is not intended for this lens at all. It's intended for the 50mm lens that Canon has produced in order to double its magnification. But I figured, well, it's doubling the magnification there. Well, maybe it'll double the magnification in my context, and sure enough, it did. And later, after I purchased that, I encouraged a few other people to experiment, and some people have found very similar results using a combination of extension tubes and teleconverters with a macro lens to also increase their magnification. But let's stay focused on this. So this is one frame, and this is in a collection I have in Lightroom called New Snowflakes, and these are the ones that are typically unedited. These are the ones that I haven't gotten to yet. And if you'll notice, there's over 450 of them here. Yeah. These are the ones I haven't touched yet, because every snowfall I go out and I shoot as many of them as I can. And I only end up editing about one of these a day through the winter, so I get about 100 of them at the end of any season. But I would have enough to edit one every single day of the year and lose my sanity in the process. So I have to kind of keep that in mind. But let me just flip back to my All Photographs catalog here, which will show me all of the other images in this sequence. And so I have this snowflake in focus along this tiny little path that we see. But if I were to click somewhere else into a different image, you'll see that now my focus has shifted to another part of the branches. And the center is completely out of focus, but I now have this nice little sliver of focus running through the branches here. And I've already gone through and I've done some...
And so you got a fiber from the glove.
Oh, yeah. So there's fibers from the mitten coming in all over the place. And they have to be edited out in part of the editing workflow in Photoshop. And there's probably more coming up all over the place, in different places. But, I mean, that's just par for the course. It's easier to clean up these fibers than it would be to clean up an entire background. If you can see, the background behind this is relatively smooth.
It is. It's amazing how smooth the background is there.
Right, you would never have expected that.
Yeah, I would expect the fibers all over the place.
It's amazing how the fiber got over the top of the snowflake there.
Oh, they get wedged right in between them sometimes. And
that's amazing.
if I look at the whole thing, you'll see that there are some areas of the image that have little clusters of fiber that are coming into focus in this frame. And but the reason why the background is so out of focus is because the depth of field is so incredibly shallow. If this thing is 1.5 millimeters across, then clearly this depth of field is a fraction of a millimeter. And so as I'm going through, I'm trying to find every single little slice, including, say, like the tiny little tip. This is a necessary frame of the image to get this tiny tip of the snowflake in focus. Even though it represents, proportionally a very small part of the crystal, it's needed to get the final result. Now, the interesting thing about this, though, is this frame that has this tiny tip the furthest in focus is a very important frame, not just to have this part in, but to have the background as blurry as possible. And that'll come into the editing workflow. So what I've done here is for all of these images, in this particular sequence, let's say if I were to take a standard one sort of right in the center, and I would go in, where am I? I'm in the library module. I would go into the develop module just to click back on my history, just to see what it comes out of camera. This is the way that it would have come out of camera. It's a little bit more subdued. It's a bit softer. Typically, I'll underexpose these images because I'm never sure exactly what parts of the image might reflect way too much light, and I don't want to have overexposed areas when I can bring up middle gray to be a bit more vibrant and sort of fill in the rest. And sharpness, of course, different adjustments for sharpness are done based on the raw files. And then I do that to one image, and then I paste it to all of them. And so that's sort of the basic adjustments done in Lightroom proper. And then I'll flag every one that I need. You can see down here in the bottom, I've got a bunch of them that have little pick flags on them. And if I switch my filter to flagged, instead of having the entire sequence of all of my images, now I just have an isolated set of all of the ones that I needed to complete this final sequence. Which in this case, because it was so small in the frame, this is the one that I chose to do today because I knew that I'd be on the show, and my editing time would be cut a bit shorter. So I've already finished editing this one, thankfully, but it's only 24 frames, which is on the low end of what I would normally be putting together. So from that point of view, with them all selected, I would right-click on any of them down here in the thumbnail view, and I would choose Edit In. And the very last option in this list is Open as Layers in Photoshop. Okay. And what that'll do is it'll send all 24 of these layers, or these images, into Photoshop as separate layers within the same workspace. And that is where that focus stacking process will come in. And so I've got that somewhat queued up here. I've actually skipped a step or two ahead, but I can illustrate that process here. So I'm just going to stop screen sharing so that I can share Photoshop and make it a bit smaller. I've got a really high-res screen here, so I just make the screens a bit smaller so that we can see it across the broadcast.
I imagine you would need a high-res. I imagine you need a high-res screen for this.
Oh, you know what? The devil is in the details, and so I absolutely need to have as many pixels on screen as I can get, and it speeds up the workflow. And that's all there is to it.
Now, do you have a 4K monitor, or are you considering getting a 4K monitor?
You know what? I've been looking very closely at Asus had announcent last year, I think at CES or somewhere around that. I might have been later on. Because I think it was in June. They announced their 32-inch ProArt 4K display, which is supposed to be really good for color, designed for people like me. And they were going to have it out in November. And there's been not a whisper of it since they announced its forthcoming release date in June of last year. So I've been kind of waiting to see if that one hits market. If not, then I'm going to be working maybe more on I think Dell has a very good one at a pretty decent price point along the way.
I would think this is perfect for you.
Yeah. But the monitor that I'm using right now is a relatively old one, but it's an LG 2560 by 1600 resolution display. Now, Mike, I'm seeing behind you. I can see that the Photoshop window in the upper right corner is showing the image, but the actual screen is not showing the image.
Yeah. So what I have is I think I can see a whole bunch of layers. I can see the navigator, but not. There you go. Now
there it is.
Yeah, it clicked in when I made the screen full res. So maybe I'll have to. If I make it small again, will it still keep it there? Yeah, it still keeps it there. Okay, so then we can at least see the layers and what's going on down in this area here.
And so if I could pause you for 1 second.
Of course.
We have a question out in chat, and I don't want to go too far before I forget it.
Sure.
So Dennis Moon is asking, and I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit. I think if you're walking out in the field, let's say you're taking a walk into the woods, and you come across walking on a river, how would you shoot? You see a flower near a river. I guess he's asking with dew on it, flower with dew on it.
Yeah.
He's just walking in the field, and I imagine he's got a macro lens with him. Maybe not a flash though, but he's got a macro lens. What quick suggestions would you have for him to make the best use of that image?
Using natural light in that case, you're battling the amount of light. If you're next to a stream, then chances are there's trees, and if there's trees, chances are there's shade. Yeah. And so that means the amount of light that you would have would be a bit more limited. And in that case, bringing your ISO up to whatever you feel is the most comfortable level will be step number one. Every camera is going to be a different point. On mine, I might even call that ISO 3200 or slightly higher. On other cameras, it might be lower, might be higher. So get yourself there and understand that you might have a bit of noise, but that's your sacrifice for getting a crisp image. I would much rather have a noisy image than a blurry one. So keeping that set, you're going to have to find some way to stabilize yourself. Now, that doesn't mean using a tripod. That could mean if the flower is growing low to the ground, rest the camera on the ground. Or if you can kneel down, you can use your knee height, and resting your camera on your knee as a great way to use that as sort of a mini tripod. It's going to give you more stability than just hand holding it, wildly. You'll also have, the possibility of having a small tripod, like I see wrapped around your mic stand there, Mike. You've got a GorillaPod, and something like that could work very well to carry around to give you that extra stability. That because you're going to be facing longer exposure times when you're doing that kind of work. That being said, though, in that kind of a scenario, I might actually recommend, and I'll show it off later. I won't stop my screen share right now. Bring a flashlight with you, a really powerful flashlight.
Like an LED flashlight or something?
Yeah, like some of those like unbelievably like bright as the sun almost flashlights. And you can add light to your subject. You can use these things can be useful for light painting. They can be useful for all sorts of stuff. It was more of a survival tool when I was recently in the Yukon, and so having a tiny flashlight with you can give you that extra burst of light on the subject, and also give you subject isolation from any kind of a busy background that might be there, and play with shadows. Even before you pick up the camera, you can sort of visualize and pre-visualize with a flashlight, even if flash photography isn't your thing. It's easier to see the effect.
Although you're going to have to get a little bit of practice there if you're going to be trying to handhold for a macro photo and shine a flashlight on it.
Oh, so what? Practice is the name of the game.
And I would think one of the thoughts is there is you focus as best you can, but then you use your body to focus, to move in and out.
So at that point, number one, you want to hedge your bets in that you might still get a blurry photograph. So you want to take, a continuous shooting burst, even if you're just focused on one particular focus point. If you are trying to travel through it, do not try to rely on autofocus. Do not even try to manually focus the lens. Lock the lens onto a focus point that you know is going to work well for your subject matter, and then physically move the entire camera forward and backward.
Right.
And that will give you a smoother transition. You'll be able to better predict exactly where the focus is going to fall through the subject. And if you can predict that on a continuous shooting burst, then the image that you want is going to be somewhere in the mix.
How often, especially in your case, when you're shooting such minuscule little items like the snowflake we're looking at, how often do you come back and realize that, I just don't have this section. I don't have an image in my list that has this section in focus?
At first, quite often, and it bothered me to no end.
Yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that I would curse up and down about. So that's why now I've learned to just shoot until I'm without a doubt, I've got every piece. And even still, there was one snowflake that I had edited earlier in this year's series where I had shot in 544 frames of it. Wow. And the 544th frame was one that I needed. And so it's very seldom that happens where I'm digging all the way through to the final end of those images. But there are times like that tell me, okay, there is a reason why I'm taking this many photographs of the same darn subject.
And Dennis, in case you're not catching why he takes 544 of that, a snowflake, because it's so small, and I know we mentioned this earlier, but just to restate it again, is because you're really zooming in, and
Right.
you've got such very tiny slivers that are in focus, and you have to really overshoot to make sure that when you get back, you have the 50, 70 images, whatever it is, that will contain focus at every layer of the image. And you're kind of scrolling through them now, where you can see that some of them have different points where they're in focus.
Exactly. And so I need to have every piece and a certain amount of overlap just to make sure that there's no sort of slightly out of focus mix in between them. So what I would do is I would typically load them up here into Photoshop. Now, I had previously gone ahead and done a separate step, but I'll reiterate and I'll show you the entire process. I'll click on the top one, and I'll click on the bottom one. I'll leave the very bottom layer alone because that one was not part of the original import. And I'll select them all. And now here's the trick. In order to work with these, they're not 100% perfectly aligned. Like if I were to click from one to the other, some of these might be better examples than other ones, but they're pretty close, but they might not be pixel perfect alignment because I'm hand holding them.
Right. I noticed that you moved through and it's moved slightly, but it's pretty good. You got really close.
Yeah, and you know, for handheld shooting, you know, as long as you can get close, then you're pretty good. What I'll do normally is I'll take the entire stack of images, and it'll make sense in a little bit, but I'll right-click on them, and I will choose, where is it here? Duplicate layers in this list here. It's kind of coming off the screen there, but I think you can see it.
I can see it, yeah.
Now, Command or Control J is the keyboard shortcut for that as well, and I love keyboard shortcuts, so I'm going to do it that way. And so I've got now, it will automatically give me one selection that's completely selected, and the other one is sitting there still lying in wait. So now that I've got two sets of this, I'll go in Photoshop and I'll go Edit, and under the Edit menu, you have Auto Align Layers. And for that case, all I have to do is just click. Actually, you know what? I'm jumping ahead of myself. I was supposed to do that first. Serves me right for trying to do this sort of half backwards and on a podcast. Select as soon as you bring them in, you want to align them, and so that every image that you have, even the duplicated set, is properly aligned. Now, the more images that you have in this set, the longer it's going to take to do this auto alignment process. I've got a fairly powerful computer here. Photoshop doesn't take full advantage of it, unfortunately. It only uses at most maybe 10 cores in some cases. Most of the operations like this one here might use 2 or 3 cores. This computer has 24 cores, and a lot of it's kind of being wasted on Photoshop because it's not N-core optimized.
Well,
but there's my...
Just so you know, that's 24 real cores, right, Don?
Yeah, 24 real cores and 48 threads.
Yes.
If you 2 separate processors. So if I do that alignment process, you'll see that now the edges of the frame, if I look at the edges here on the top corners, you'll see that they're all kind of jaggy because it's repositioned one and the other, and so you're just seeing the edges of the frames as they're repositioned together to be all part of the same thing. Now, once that happens, I will then duplicate the stack. Control J is the process for it, and I will go Edit and Auto Blend. And it's smart enough to know that if there's enough overlap here, it will automatically select stack images. And so then I just click OK, and we play the waiting game once again. The waiting game here in Photoshop is time intensive. You know, if you've got a slower computer, you get up, you go make yourself a sandwich, you come back. It's just one of those things that, you know, we have to deal with. Especially, you know, I tried to do an auto alignment in Photoshop using 206 layers the other day, and it brought my computer to its knees, even though my computer has 128 gigabytes of RAM. So
did it use all the? Let me get a little geeky on you. Did you use all the RAM?
I used 98 gigs in one Photoshop process.
I tell photographers, whether you're Mac or PC, I know you're PC, I'm PC, Tim's PC, but so much is similar between Mac and PC that a lot of the bickering that goes back and forth is not necessary. But you know, RAM is RAM. If you're using Photoshop on a Mac, you're using Photoshop on a PC, or you're using like Adobe Premiere, which I'll have to do to edit this thing. They suck up RAM like you won't believe. And my belief is the bare minimum now, if you're buying a new computer, 16 gig of RAM. Think 32, and 32 is not going crazy. If you're doing some stuff like Don's doing here, you probably need to be thinking 64 gig as a minimum.
When I was starting to do my Snowflake work, I had a 24 gigs of RAM in my computer, and I was always hitting the limit. So just keep that in mind.
I don't do anything like you do. I have 32 gig, and when I go to edit this show, I will max out that 32 gig.
The joys of new technology. You know, we always push the limits, especially, you know, me and my work. I love to push the limits in this kind of stuff. So here we have the focus stacked piece. Now, it's not perfect. There's a lot of slight misalignments. We've got to do some background cleanup here, and I'll show you some easy ways to do that. This is great not just for snowflakes. I know a lot of us, you know, watching the show might not be keen on doing this particular subject, but it works for water droplets or insects that are stationary, or, you know, even household objects. You'd be surprised how awesome, you know, the tip of a ballpoint pen might look in front of in front of a camera. There's so many cool stuff just sitting on your desk right now that's worthy of taking a picture of. But now I've got, next to each of these layers down here in the layer panel, I've got these layer masks, because it's pulled information in from each one. If I reveal that layer mask and I just show you, there's some areas on that one, there's some areas on that one, there's some areas there. Every different layer will have a different part of it that becomes visible. And so in that case, I'm going to take this entire set that would normally still stay selected, and I'm going to merge that into one single layer now. So I can right-click on that, and I can click on Merge Layers in that list, or Command or Control E is the keyboard shortcut to do that. And I live by keyboard shortcuts because, again, it saves me time. Now I'm going to take that layer that has everything all combined together, and I'm going to move that to the bottom of the stack. That's the layer that was down there to begin with. That's the part where I had started on that process. And then I'm going to go through every single layer in this stack, and I'm going to turn them off. Because I'm going to use them to go back through manually and do automatic adjustments on each and every layer. Now, I won't do that on the podcast because this editing process can take me hours. But there's two layers in here that are important to consider. And so when I go back down to the bottom, and I'm going to zoom in quite a bit onto this here, say 200, maybe even 300%. Because I had edited this snowflake earlier today, I kind of know what layers give me some valuable pieces. And one of them was image number 9000. Where is it? Right here. So if I turn this on, you can see that image number 9000 has this center area here, specifically right in this almost like a shield on the top layer of the snowflake, very nice and pristine, where the Photoshop process muddied it all up and screwed things up for me because there was a fiber that was coming up on top of it in another layer that was visible in that other layer. And the focus stacking algorithm is just going to take everything that's in focus in every image and try to smash them together. Now, I don't care about the fibers, but I can't tell Photoshop that. And there's also other like tiny alignment issues and various other parts of the image. But if I take this one layer, now that I'm going back through the stack and pretend I'm going through every single one and making adjustments, I create a layer mask. So now I've got that layer mask set up there. And what I'll do is I'll press Control or Command I, and that inverts it. And I keep my fingers on those keys because I'm going to have to keep pressing that back and forth to give me a visual representation of what areas need fixing. And so then I know that this area right here needs to be painted in from this one layer. So I'm going to paint that in from this one layer, and I'm going to go back and forth and see, yeah, right up, fat fingers here pressing the P key instead of the square brackets. And so I know that there's areas right up along even this ridge here that would look better from this frame than the ones that Photoshop had picked. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go through each and every layer to this degree, zooming in and trying to find out, you know, there's even some other details right in under here that I think work a little bit better on this particular image. And I navigate around, keeping my fingers kind of constantly going back and forth, pressing the Control or Command I to invert back and forth to see, yes, right down here, these areas here, Photoshop really screwed up. But on this layer, they're nice, and at least they're more pristine. So then on the underlying layer, I paint in the correction, and now I then move on to the next piece, or further down on that snowflake. And so if you could imagine, this is a fairly simple crystal compared to some of them that I work on. Mm-hmm. The big monstrous snowflakes, they'll take me 8 hours to go through this part of a process and just figure out exactly what needs to be edited and how.
How long would this one take you?
This one took me about 3.5 hours.
Okay.
To get through this layer adjustment process, that might take me, it might have taken me an hour and a half or so on this one. But there's further edits that need to be done afterwards. I want to jump to the forward-most facing image. I told you before that this one was an important one that has the tip in focus. And the tip is, there are 6 tips, but the one that is furthest away from the mitten is the one that I care the most about. Because if I take a look at that frame overall, and I turn it off, you'll see all of the detail that came in from every single fiber of the mitten in every single frame is now represented in sort of some sort of hodgepodge of coming in all these different places. But if I take the tip of the snowflake that is furthest away from the mitten, then all of those fibers become a lot less distracting. So I will do that exact same process, create a layer mask and invert it, and then I will paint in on this layer all of the background stuff that was way too busy from the full focus stacking process. And so, I'd go in through, every little piece. And this is a huge time saver when it comes to the next step, which would be then using my clone stamp tool to clean up all the rest of those. And it's not impossible to do. It's a time-consuming process to get in there and do that.
Are you using a mouse or like a Wacom tablet?
I use a mouse. I use a mouse for this. I mean, I prefer the pixel precision where I could move my mouse 1 pixel to the left or the right and know that I'm hitting exactly the right spot. The tablets, the Wacom tablets and other similar things, and I've even done some of this stuff on my Surface Pro 3, which has a pen input. It works and it's fun, but I find that the mouse, for this kind of work, just gives me the better accuracy when I'm really zoomed in, and I'll typically hit the edges of this when I'm zoomed in to like 300 or 400% just to make sure I'm getting the most out of this front-facing layer. So then, at that step, I'm going to bring it into Photoshop, and we're already in Photoshop. But then I'm going to get crazy with my clone stamp tools, my content-aware fill tools, and I'm going to create something like this. From this, we get this, and so that part of the process might take me 20 to 30 minutes, just cleaning it all up. And I make sure that I get the entire background, even well beyond the frame, as much of it as I can, clean and clear. Because when I go into some of the other areas, like when I'm trying to get into all these nitty-gritty corners, I might have to sample and clone in from other parts of the image that have exactly the right density of the sort of dark gray background. And then I've also gone in, if you can see here, there was, in this one, if I zoom in on this one to that same degree, there was all sorts of fibers and interactions and things over top of that, and that's taken care of here. The beauty of snowflakes is they're very geometrical, so you've got very similar looking features on different branches, and you've got tons of material for you to clone into from different parts. So that's where this particular section was, and that's where I end up as a result. And yet there's practice involved in that as well. It's a tedious process. I'm not going to say that it's a joyous thing to be going through it, but that is sort of what it is. Now, if I go, I think I've got a number of layers here. This would be the original from what you've seen in the previous frame. And then I have the basic cleanup with the clone tools, getting rid of all the stuff that happened to be just sort of right around the edges. The stuff that I can get to without being very precise is done there. And then the next one would be going in and cleaning up all of the other little intricacies right into the edges of the crystal to make sure that background is as consistent as I can make it. And then the final one would be getting rid of the overlaps. So the areas in that bottom branch, and also if I were to zoom in on this top one here, I have this one that's somewhat out of focus running across these crystals here, or these little side branches, and then using the clone tool to clean that up, just to get the most pristine results as I can for that overall image. And then comes my fun editing workflow, where from this point there's a couple of things that I need to consider. One of them is color, because I know some of the color in here is natural, and some of it might be created by the lens and chromatic aberration and certain things. You'll see, if I were to zoom in real close on some of these branches, you'll see a lot of greens and magentas. And that, some of it might be actually natural to the crystal, but it's not something that we'd normally associate with a snowflake, and some of it is created or enhanced by the optics of the lens. So I need to try and remove that from the equation while still keeping intact the colors here and still making the color in the branches believable. Not to just completely suck it all out and keep it lifeless. So what I do here is I bring up, in Photoshop, I go under the filter menu, I do camera raw filter. But before I do, I duplicate my layer. So Control J will do that for me. And I'll go filter, camera raw filter. And in camera raw, I don't even know if that's going to come up on the screen here. I might have to undo my Hangout and do a full-on screen share, because the camera raw screen is going to be a separate deal. Share screens and share the whole darn screen here. Now, in this case, and I'll wait for it to catch up to me, but Camera Raw has a wonderful tool that, for the most part, is missing from Photoshop. I mean, it's in Lightroom too. If you want to go back to Lightroom and come back and forth, and you can do it there. But in the case of Camera Raw, I need to have precision over color fringing control. And yeah, I'm seeing on your screen behind you there, Mike.
Yeah,
It's not showing up here.
While you talk, I want to cut over to. I don't think this is the exact image, but I want to give an example of how you end up.
Yeah. So that's a great example of a finished result.
Yeah.
And for me, that is the fine tuning of the process. And you'll go through this with any image, not just a macro photograph. The focus stacking process at this point is done. You've accomplished the goal required for that. And so I don't know if you're seeing my screen yet there, Mike. If not, I'm going to stop and I'm going to try to just do a screen share on Camera Raw and see if Camera Raw even shows up on my list. And it doesn't. All right. Well, I will save you that process. And what I'll explain is that in Camera Raw, under the lens corrections tool, there's a panel called Color. And in there's a defringe tool. And here I'll set the purple amount to say 6 and the green amount to the same thing. But then I'll take the full-on green slider all the way up to pushing it into the aquas, because those greens kind of hit into those aqua tones and you want it to eat into that. And then I click OK. And so then I'll do a screen share back on Photoshop, which will show you the results. And I'll be able to show you that sort of the back and forth there.
Okay.
That will hopefully give you an idea as to what was accomplished, but what needs to be fixed here as well. So if I go back into the Photoshop workflow, and we take a look at, in this case, and I know it's still loading up there, but it should be there. Maybe I'll slightly resize the window to make it pick up things properly.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. So now you can see here that all that green and magenta color is gone. If I look at the original, it's there, and then now it's gone. But it's actually adding in some weird, colors. There's still some reds in there that make it look kind of odd, and it looks relatively flat and lifeless. Now, if I go down to the center, and I see what happens with that tool, it really mucks up the center here. So this is not a good tool to use globally on this image, but if you remember, I duplicated my layer. This is a new layer. So I can create a layer mask and I can paint this effect off where I need it to disappear. So I can paint it off of the center where I want those central colors to come back in. And possibly, some of these branches had some nice sort of prismatic color that was kind of coming into them. And I want to bring a little bit of that back. So I'll go through selectively and bring in some of the colors that I know are natural, that I know I need to bring back in. But then I'll go even farther and say, you know what, this effect is great, but I need to take the opacity of this whole adjustment maybe down to 80% so that it's there, but some of those underlying colors might just come back in a tiny bit, adding a bit more of color tonality into those branches. I clean it up further with all sorts of other custom work, and I'll save you the gritty details about that. But this would be something of a completed piece. I've punched up the contrast on this one so that it looks better on screen. I would probably present it differently if I was to do a print of it. The final piece would be this one here, where I've done some enlarging and I've done some various other adjustments to it, just to bring out sort of the best details and to make it look as eye-catching from a distance. Because oftentimes people will see them on the web as a very, very small little icon on something, and I want them to really grab attention from there, so that people then zoom in to all of those beautiful details that can be kind of captured within that snowflake.
Looks like a glass ornament.
It does.
It's amazing.
It really lets you. You've always heard every snowflake is different, but when you see how when Don photographs these, there's similarities between some of them, but they're so intricate that you realize how they are all different.
Right. It's like a fingerprint.
Yeah,
it really is.
So Don, how much of what you just went over is in your book?
Almost all of that. Okay. Yeah. I would, my editing workflow deviates from snowflake to snowflake depending on what it needs. But that entire workflow of the entire processing from loading them into Lightroom through the finished result in Photoshop, that's all covered in exhaustive detail. So if anybody wants to kind of get a good primer on that, and again, those techniques are the exact same techniques that I use on my water droplet images and on a lot of my insect images. And there have been plenty of times where just through experimentation, I've maybe refined or changed or been creative and adjusted that workflow. But that's sort of the basics of it, and it works well for me, and I've done it hundreds of times.
Now, if I could, if I can leave snowflakes here for a second, on some of your images that you sent me, let me hit us, and then let me find the. On some of them, you have some insect shots, and
Oh yeah.
people when they look at insect shots, they often think,
I got the shivers just thinking about an insect up close. I'm sorry.
well, in
Well,
this,
see, I use my camera as a shield, right? It makes me far less afraid of the insects when the camera is sitting in between me and it.
as long as
I
it's
like
not a
that.
spider, as long as it's not a
Yeah,
spider.
I'm still pretty terrified of spiders still.
But so I'm going to pull up this image here, and this is of looks like a bird, not a bird, an insect in flight, maybe a bee. But what I want to specifically talk about first is often when novices think of macro of an insect like this, we love the detail that you get in the eyes.
Yeah, well, and so the same as with any insect or any animal or any person, the eyes in focus is kind of paramount to getting a good photograph. If the eyes are out of focus, then you're going to have a really hard time grabbing somebody's attention with it.
Exactly. And this one you can sell, you did some focus stacking or something there to get so much of the body in focus. But what I'm wondering is what level of magnification do I need to do before I start seeing that detail in the eye where it's not just a smooth, big eye, but I'm seeing the little lenses that are all inside that eye. Like you can in this bee, you can see the little lenses that they have all in their eye.
Well, I should correct you there. It's a hoverfly, not a bee.
Okay.
They mimic
Hoverfly.
bees, and that's sort of one of their behavioral things. But in this case, this is actually a focus stacked image of a hoverfly in flight. It's not grounded or anything. It's living and flying in the air as I'm taking this picture, and I'm taking multiple images of it to do some focus stacking.
All right, we're going to come back to that in just a second because that sounds impossible.
but
That sounds absolutely impossible. Yes.
But the challenge here, of course, is magnification, and you need to have. It depends on the size of the insect because there are some like gigantic beetles out there in the world that you don't even need a macro lens to get that effect on. But the average stuff you find in your garden, I would say a 1-to-1 magnification, which is the closest that you get with the average macro lens, will get you into that fascination factor zone. But when you get there. And I talk to a lot of photographers that feel this way. As soon as you can get a glimpse of that, as soon as you can get that fascination sort of in your images, that gets right into your veins. You just want to get closer and closer and closer. And so this one is done at maybe about 2 or 3-to-1 magnification. And so, the closer you get, the more fascinating it can become. But again, the closer you get, the shallower your depth of field will become. And if that eye is a fraction of a millimeter out of focus, then it's going to look like a soft red blob because you're not going to get the definition in exactly those details. They'll blur out so fast, it's not even an image worth looking at. So precision is important, but at this level, there is so much random chance for getting that focus, especially for insects, because if you're shooting in the wild, you're not necessarily going to be tethered to a tripod. So shoot. Fill up your memory cards, buy new memory cards. I'll take 100 pictures to get one good one of an insect if I need to. As I'm changing angles, as I'm doing focus stacking stuff, as I'm shooting continuously, knowing that the subject might be moving, I might be moving. If it's on a leaf, it might be blowing in the wind. There are so many elements that could possibly shift my focus around. And I can try my best to get it right where I want it, but I hedge that bet by photographing as many of them as I can.
Okay, so I assumed that you had clips off camera that were holding the wings out like that, but you're saying this is a, what did you say it was again? What kind
Hoverfly.
A hoverfly.
A hoverfly in flight. And
Alive.
yeah, so
Yes,
I have multiple questions. One is, are you just running around chasing this thing, banging off shots as fast as you can? And I guess even with that, I don't know how you get into focus stacking, but you couldn't even be using a flash at that point because if you're doing 8 frames a second or something. I don't know what camera you're shooting with. I can't remember which one you said.
This at this point, I think this is photographed in rural Bulgaria, and at the time it was done with a 5D Mark II, so that's 3.9 frames per second.
Okay.
And so it's not going to be that fast. My flash, it is done using a flash, was able to keep up with me.
Okay.
To that degree.
That was going to be my
I'm
question.
just pulling it. I photographed this in 2012, June 15th to be precise. So I'm going to give me a minute just to pull it up in Lightroom, just as proof that I haven't clipped it down, because I know that it does kind of have that feel the way that I cropped it in there for that kind of a presentation. But
Now, how far away are you from it at this point?
That working distance is probably around 6 centimeters or so away from. And now keep in mind, hoverflies.
Is that about 2 inches?
Yeah, probably about that. Now, hoverflies hover. I mean, they live up to their name. They will stay stationary in the air, and just kind of sit there, and so in that case, in that example, you'll have it's like trying to find like a bat darting around in like a bright blue sky or something. It's almost impossible to actually find the subject in the frame. And so here I've got I'll bring this up here in Lightroom here. I'll do a screen share because I think that this will be valuable for people to see the shots that I had taken of this particular subject. So where are we here? Screen share. Let me know when you see it. There we go.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, so that's one frame of him, and I was actually able to take quite a few shots of this guy. Sometimes the light and the angle was a bit different. Every time I would fire off a bunch of shots, he would slightly deviate from his position. And of course, here I am I'm hand holding a flash off camera to get a good angle so that it's not. At first, I realized that it was hitting the background more than him, and so then I'm trying to find different angles that might have him lit more than the background. And then as he's flying about and changing his positioning, I'm constantly trying to get him in the frame. Now, keep in mind he's hovering, and so. Hoverflies hover. He's going to be staying relatively stationary, but even still, it's very difficult to get that proper background behind the subject that's nice and pleasing, that's not too much brighter than the subject. And now this was focus stacked, I think, from 2 or 3 different frames. Okay. So there was one frame, there was another frame, and there was another frame. And they're all in slightly different compositions, slightly different positions. The wings are different. So I had to align these manually and took the detail from different parts of his body and combined them together in what amounts to this. It's not an easy process, and I didn't get the entire thing. His backside is still a little bit out of focus. But I think it's an admirable job for, photographing insects focus stacked in flight is not something you usually do.
No, not at all.
I've done it a number of times. There might have been another image of a bee flying into a flower that I included in the images that I had sent you. Yeah. And that one is also focus stacked, and it's not staying still. It is actively flying right into a flower. And the funny thing was, my camera was set up stationary on that shot. I guess I'll wait for you to find it there. My camera was set up stationary, and I wanted to have a 180 millimeter lens, so it was far enough away from that flower so that the bees would feel comfortable enough to jump in and out of it. And so, I'm setting that up, and sure enough, the bee comes along, and as soon as I see the bee approaching, I set the camera on rapid fire, 12 frames per second, in this case on a 1DX. And so as the bee is flying, it's actively passing through my focal plane. So from one frame, his head is in focus. From one frame, his butt's in focus. And because I can use the flower from one frame, but I've got detail in the subject from one frame to the next, and only because I was shooting at 12 frames per second, he was flying in at exactly the right speed in between those 2 frames to shift my focus for me onto different parts of his body. I was able to combine them together to do an in-flight focus stack of a bee. A lot of that's luck, but the trickiest part about it is to realize what you've captured on your camera. For me to see those 2 separate images and realize that together they are far better than either of them are apart, to understand that synergy there, I think is paramount to knowing what you can do in post with what you've been able to capture in camera.
And animals like this, or creatures like this, I imagine, like you're looking at here, how many images of this hoverfly did you take that didn't work out, and how many images of maybe this bee wasn't quite the same thing, but how the hoverfly, you probably took quite a few that didn't work out.
Oh yeah.
And that's part of the process, especially with a moving creature like that.
Take far more shots than you ever think you need. It's okay. It doesn't cost you money. I talk to a lot of people that are maybe against that mantra that grew up in the days of film, where every shutter click was associated with dollars spent. But now there's lots of new creative opportunities, especially in macro photography, that are only available when you drastically overshoot your subject.
Well, Don, gosh, this is our second show on macro, and I feel like we still just touched the surface. There's so much more we could talk to you about. And if you don't mind, I'd like to pass through a few of these images and just talk a minute about them.
Let's do it.
I know I've kept you a little longer than what we normally keep people, but I'd like to go over a few of these because they were so fantastic. You can see them behind me, but let me let me get to directly to ones that I want to. And we've streamed some of these before in the past. But this one, is this salt?
Those are grains of salt. And
I never had any idea the grains of salt were cubes.
Yeah, well, I mean, salts, halite or sodium chloride will form into cubic crystals. A lot of different minerals will form into cubes, and salt is one of them. And so it's kind of fun to see it in its mineral form. And I mean, that's just regular old plain table salt that I took a porcelain cup off the just out of the cupboard. Put it on its side on my kitchen table and sprinkled some salt on top. Most of it rolled off, but some of it stayed on. And then I got in the black reflective surface is just that black porcelain cup, and again just setting that up, getting the camera set up freehand, and focus stacking the heck out of it. And it's a difficult subject to focus stack too, because you've got differences in depth that are rather extreme. They don't gradually transcend from the foreground to another layer in the background. So the automatic focus stacking tools kind of have trouble with that. So there's a lot of, again, manual fix-up required in that kind of an image. But it's table salt. I mean, how cool is that? It doesn't follow a lot of the rules of photography in the sense that it doesn't tell a story. It doesn't have some of the regular impactful stuff that draws you into a photograph. But I think in macro, there's that fascination factor that can kind of trump all that stuff as long as it's cool enough. You can get away with
what I was
anything.
thinking. This is something that anybody could try. It's not like a snowflake that's going to melt, the water droplets are going to dry up. This is going to sit there and give you an opportunity to have time with it, at least, I would think.
Yeah, well, now keep in mind, this is photographed at 12:1 magnification. So this is on the extreme side. That's the difficult part of it. But once you can get there, and there's many ways to get there, but once you can get to an extreme magnification factor, then that's where the fun happens. I mean, that's where every ordinary object becomes something of curiosity and fascination in front of your camera.
Well, that's what you said before, where once you get that bug at 1:1, well, now you want to get to something different and get 12:1. That's amazing.
Anybody who thinks I've watched different people, different photographers, and they shoot in these wonderful environments, and I don't have that where I live, which is what I think, is a lot of the types of things that Don's taking photos are common things you can find around your house. You just need to take the time to learn and have the patience.
The images we talked about so far, Mike, they have been either taken on my kitchen table or 2 feet from my back door, with the exception of that hoverfly that was in rural Bulgaria. Yeah. But that was just a moment of opportunity. These opportunities are around you every day. If you've got a garden, heck, if you've got flower pots sitting on a balcony, you've got an unlimited supply of photographic subjects. If you've got salt in your cupboard, you do. I mean, it's kind of fun to think about that the world is not. The world that we see is not the world the way it is. There's no such thing as the world the way it is, because perception is everything, and macro photography gives you a different perception on the way the world could be. And I think that runs right through a lot of my work. I love photographing in infrared. We did a show on that, and again, that's a world that we can't see, but it's a world. It's the way the world could possibly be. I like fisheye photography. I like photographing the northern lights. I like trying to get to places where people rarely get to, because these are all ways to see the world that are commonly unseen. I find that is part of the adventure of photography for me. Hey, Mike, how about you bring up the, I don't know if we've shown it yet, the frozen soap bubble.
Yeah, one before that, because I have it second. I just quickly wanted to bring up this one because it is so interesting to me. There seems to be so much going on, and I'm not quite sure what this is, what created this.
That's frost growing on the side door window of a truck. So here I am in the Yukon wilderness. We had just gone out on an early morning shoot, and I knew it was cold. But I was using. We were in a motorized canoe going out and doing some scouting. I was with a group of hunters, and they were looking for moose and things. I was looking for wildlife. I ended up getting a great shot of a bald eagle flying into the sunrise. But while I was out shooting, I noticed that there was frost growing on my lens itself. This was like early enough in the morning. The temperatures were still very cold, and this was prime frost growing conditions. So I'm thinking, okay, we got to get back to camp because I'm sure there is frost growing on something more beautiful than my camera lens itself. And so then as soon as we get back, I hunt around. I'm looking all over the place, and sure enough, on the windows of the vehicles, there was just beautiful frost patterns, some of the most beautiful that I've seen.
It is beautiful.
And so this is one of the macro shots that I've done in with natural light because I just loved the way that it looked, and the flash stuff that I had done didn't quite replicate the same effect. So I had to crank up that ISO pretty high and get results that would work with just visible light. And again, it's focus stacked, and this is again a very time-consuming image to focus stack. I wish the window was clean to begin with, but there was tons of specks of dust everywhere that took me, again, it made this a 4-hour editing process, even though it wasn't a snowflake, just to clean up the background. But I think it was worth the effort.
So now, Tim, you ready for this? Because this one, maybe we'll end on this one because we're an hour and a half into it, which, just means, Don, we got to have you come back again.
You know what? We'll make this a trifecta of macro, or heck, I'll talk about anything. You know that I do a lot of crazy work in photography.
Yeah, no, you have a lot. I don't want to limit you to just macro and just infrared, although you've become my resident expert on both. We need to have you back for something else. But let's end on this one and watch this one, Tim. This one.
That looks cool. I can see it in the back over your shoulder.
Yeah, and of course, you guys probably are not, who are watching this being streamed, or Tim, if you're watching it over my shoulder, you're not seeing it in its true glory. Go to Don's website and where he'll have them there, and we'll have these images in the show notes too, a reduced quality version of them. But you get a feel for it here. You said this is a soap bubble.
Yeah, so this is
Wow.
I'd seen other people do this, and I'd love the results. So what happens is with a soap bubble, if you put it out in the cold at in Fahrenheit, I'd say between between 9 and 15 in Fahrenheit. Any colder than that would work too, but this was done at around minus 15 Celsius, which is around 0 Fahrenheit, and just above it. But in that temperature, it will freeze, and it will start to grow from kind of the top and the bottom, these frost fronds, almost like ferns, up and around the bubble itself. Now, as I had mentioned earlier on in this podcast, before we had discussed or before we had seen the image, that this is a mixture of water and dish detergent and some white corn syrup. The corn syrup gives it a bit more strength so that when it hits onto the surface of the snow, it doesn't immediately pop, although most of them do. If you blow enough of them, you'll find a few of them that stick. And then you have to race to get the camera in the right position, because you can't predict exactly where that bubble is going to form, at least the way that I was doing it. Now, this was my first attempt at this. I had read online. I gathered the materials to make the soap stuff, and I built myself a little bubble wand out of a coat hanger, and so I set to work and started creating this image. And the temperatures had only dropped low enough after dark, so this was not lit with a camera flash or anything. This was lit with just one of those high-powered flashlights I was talking about earlier. And so these things, I can't remember how much I paid for it, like $100 or something similar. And it gives me the light of 1,000 suns. It's so bright and powerful that it's able to give me enough light for this. But I realized I was still shooting at like ISO 800 or something. So I've now just gone out and I've bought one of these things that has 4 times the power, so that I can put filter. Because what I was trying to do to get more of like a nicer glow to it was to put different colors in front of the light source, maybe to get some nice transitions of colors from the backlight. And I've got all sorts of old camera filters that have different colors on them, but it was darkening down the light too much, so I need more light to do it. But getting the focus right away to where it needs to be, and then you shoot like crazy on the fastest that you can, because those frost crystals are growing very quickly. And so if you don't get the camera in position within a matter of maybe 10 seconds, you're not going to get the shot. And then as soon as you're in position, then you just fire rapid fire bursts, and you'll know that one of them in the sequence is going to have the focus probably where you want, and hopefully the frost growing in a nice, pleasing composition. I shot maybe about, I'm going to say, 50 or so different bubbles, through this particular sequence, and some of them I think turned out really well. This is, arguably my favorite from that. But I want to just illustrate the concept, because I think everybody should experiment with this. This is a fun thing. These are bigger than snowflakes. You don't need extreme macro to do this. This was done at 1:1. I probably could have been even further back than that in order to get these results. So I want to, if you wouldn't mind me, Mike, I know we've gone on way too long, but just to do another quick screen share of Lightroom here, just to give you a concept of some of the other ones that would have been on my list. So yeah, this is another fun one that hasn't really gone through much in the way of editing. Then there was, they're really cool subjects to photograph, and
it looks like one of those little snow globes almost sometimes that you get.
Right.
It does.
Like in a fantasy world.
Yeah. And so,
I like that one right there.
Yeah, and every one of these is going to be different based on the way the light's going to be hitting it, and so this is one that I like them when the frost is still growing rather than when it's already reconnected itself together. It has a nicer effect, but it's all part and parcel to just the beauty of the winter macro photography. And again, just like that water droplet refraction shot that I had shared earlier, it was a manufactured image. It's not something that you could just walk out and find. It has to be creative. You have to have the intent to build up a shot like this and to find something that works really well for you. And experimentation is
like you said, this one, at least compared to the salt cubes, is 1:1. So
Exactly.
This is something that I probably have a better shot of creating this than something at 12:1.
Yeah. And there wasn't any complicated lighting involved with this. As I had said, in this kind of a scenario, this is done with a flashlight, and albeit an unbelievably bright and crazy powerful flashlight, but a flashlight nonetheless as the light source. So it's actually resting on the snow in behind, and I'm able to use that as enough light to create the final image. So that simplifies the equation. That makes it easier for people to go out and try this without having to worry about...
Right, now you're not holding in one hand the camera and the other hand the flash. So you're right. It makes it easier and 1:1.
Keep in mind, this was my first time experimenting with this particular subject. You better believe I'm going to go out and do this again and again.
Oh, with these results, these are great results for a first time. Now, are you blowing the bubbles? Are you blowing the bubbles standing up and then immediately dropping to the ground and start taking photos?
Well, so if say the surface where the bubbles are falling here, I'm blowing the bubbles maybe about right here. Okay. And so I'm blowing them, and hopefully they will adhere right below where I am. So I've got at least some sort of a trajectory where they would go. Sort of, I can figure out where they'd fall so that my light in behind is going to be shining roughly through in that general area. I might need to quickly adjust the light a little bit and hop down over that area, but my camera is in one hand, the bubble one's in the other. And as soon as I see the proper droplet or bubble, I drop the wand, grab the camera up, and I get in. The camera's already on the right settings, and I move the camera again forward and backward through it to get that focus point. Not worrying about focusing or autofocus or any of that nonsense. You don't have time for it.
Does your wife ever think you're crazy?
She supports my endeavors.
What's that, Tim?
You're not going to get in minus to 10 degrees down in Atlanta.
So we hinted that he doesn't live down here in Georgia by the fact that he's doncom.ca. CA in this case, and with the flag behind
Canadian
you,
flag
we should all be able to figure out that you're Canadian and live up in Canada. So your temperatures are a little bit cooler than what I have down here in Atlanta.
They are, but you know what? There are very large walk-in freezers all around the world.
Absolutely.
And not to say you're going to go and buy a big walk-in freezer yourself, but I'm sure if you were to bring up this crazy... You'll look like a lunatic if you go up to like some meat packers and ask to use their walk-in freezer for this. But... If you plead your case and show exactly what you want to do,
if I blow some bubbles in your freezer,
you never know who's going to say yes.
You may be worried about the person who would say yes.
Yeah. Let me join you in there.
Well, Don, thank you again for coming out. We've got to talk offline about you coming back because I'd like for you to be a regular guest. We never can get to the end. There's always more we want to ask you, more we want for you to share with us on both subjects that you come, and we've only touched 2 subjects with Don.
I'd love to talk on anything like wildlife or astrophotography or landscape and HDR work or any sort of like advanced post-processing techniques. Mike, have me back. I'd be happy to talk about any of it.
Absolutely. We'll work something out with that. We don't want to abuse you. We know that you're a busy guy editing all these photos, but we'll have to work out something for that. So before we head out, I want to just do a few closing things here. And one thing is... we had the Best of 2014 contest that was December, and we announced the winners in January, and all the winners have got their winnings. And guess what, Tim? We still have this.
Oh,
We still have the 1 year prepaid subscription to Photoshop, the photography plan, Adobe photography plan, which is Photoshop and Lightroom, because the winner got a choice of either a $100 Amazon gift card or this, and they chose the $100 Amazon gift card.
well, they already had the Photoshop Lightroom package.
They already had the Photoshop. They already had Adobe Creative Cloud, or they had Photoshop or Lightroom. So you didn't need that. So I've got to figure out how we're going to go about giving that away because I have no need for it. I already have Adobe Creative Cloud. So we're going to have to figure out how to give this away to some other lucky winner. And if you forget, the way that we are able to afford these things is through our Amazon.com, our Amazon link. Anytime you go to Amazon, just before you go, use jpeg2RAW.com/Amazon. Just type that in, save it as a bookmark, and then we will get a small credit when you go to buy something there. It doesn't have to be photography related. It could be anything from phones to shoes to books to clothes, anything you want to buy. I bought a TV recently, and
You can buy these here on Amazon.
there you go.
Absolutely.
Third-hand tools.
And just use our link, and we'll use the money to give back to the people in our listeners or viewers or whatever else. Speaking of listeners, if you want to get the show, the best way to do it is subscribe through iTunes, TiVo, Stitcher, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, YouTube, any way you want to. We probably got it. I now have on my TV. I have Google Chrome. I don't know how many people have Google Chrome. The little Google Chrome plugin. I have on my Android phone. I get the show and other podcasts I listen to through Beyond Pod. It's available for Android. I'm sure there's one for iPhone. And I have the Google Chrome Chromecast. And I can just hit on my phone, Chromecast, and boom, there's jpeg2RAW up on the TV. So now I can watch our show through the YouTube app for the TV, through Chromecast for the TV, or through TiVo. All of my
Is that how you sit down and relax after an evening of hard work, is to watch yourself?
Actually, it's not.
I can't say that I've ever watched myself afterwards.
Actually, it's not. I get enough of us just doing the show and then editing it. But if you want to get it that way, if you want to do that, heck, if you want to watch the show live, you could even do that. Although you'd miss out on the chat. But if you have a way you want to get the show and we're not there, just email me at podcast@jpeg2RAW, and I will work on getting it there. If you're not already a member of our forums, and we've had some growth in the forums recently, some people posting there, jpeg2RAW.com/forums. That's a good place to go and get and communicate and start helping us build a community for people who don't necessarily want to be in Facebook or Google Plus or whatever else. There's people that don't want to be in those two social medias. If you do want to be, the most active place for us, at least, is our Facebook group, which is facebook.com/groups/jpeg2RAW. Every month we have a photo challenge, except for December where we have a contest. This month the challenge is documentary. We're almost at the end of the month, so if you don't get in the next 4 days, then go to next month and we'll have a new topic there. But we'd love to have you out there in our Facebook group and contributing to the monthly challenge or to the bi-weekly editing challenge, which we ended one Saturday and a new one will start up again this Sunday. So we'd love to have you out in either place there. And I think that's all I have, Tim. If you want to come out and see the live show, most Tuesday nights, jpeg2RAW.com/live. Well, you got to remember, jpeg2RAW.com/live. Come out and see the live show where you can enter our chat room and ask us questions. We'll pass them on to the guest, and you can interact that way. Anything else, Tim?
Nothing else. I think you pretty much covered it all.
Yep, I think I did. I would like to thank Jeff Troutman and Aaron Shutt, I think is his name, who I'm still using their music for the intro and exit. The little clips that you hear there, I'm still using their music. So thank you guys for that. It's serving us well for a number of shows now. So thank you. And until next show, keep it raw. Good night, everybody.
Everybody.